And I'd like to welcome our moderators, Durdana Sumro, who's here, and she'll do the introductions. And a welcome to His Excellency, the Italian Ambassador, and our two authors. Thank you, Durdana.
Thank you, Shamil. Well, it's a pity that the audience is not larger, because I tell you that these are two of the most interesting books that I have read in a long time, you know. They are fascinating, they are engrossing, and they are very moving as well. So, and the issues that they raise are very relevant to today's times, to us in particular. And so I hope that more people join us. But a very warm welcome to you all, ladies and gentlemen, and especially to His Excellency Adriano Chiodi Gianferrani, Ambassador of Italy, who has come specially for this, and to our two authors, Silvia Di Natale and Kim Eklund. So the way we will structure this, I think as we are a very small, intimate group, we will try to make it more participative and more interactive. But I thought just because everything needs a structure, so basically we will be presenting one of the books, Kuraj first. The author Silvia Di Natale is Italian, and she will be speaking on that. And then the next book that we will be reading from and talking about is The Disappeared, which is written by Kim Eklund. I just wanted to say that, I think Silvia was asking me earlier that is there anything common between these two books? And what is, of course, strikes one immediately is that both of them are about very strong women, you know. And to have strong women characters, I think is is not so common. I wish it was more common. And the books, the women are very courageous, and each of them has different experiences. Kuraj is, Silvia Di Natale is basically an ethno-sociologist by profession. And Kuraj is a remarkable story of a Central Asian nomad girl who is actually a descendant of Genghis Khan. And she is sent at the age of 9, all by herself. She travels to Cologne, a city which is just recovering from World War II. She describes how she has to adjust to life, in that city, because she is a girl with a tribal background, and she has to learn a new language. But on top of that, she is the family that she is living with want her to assimilate into the culture of the city, and they want her not just to speak the language, but even in her looks, they want her to be more like them. So the first thing she has to do is she has to cut off her long hair, her long black hair. Then she has to dye it blonde, and then even her Mongolian nose, she has to chop it off and, make it more like a European nose, which is not the easiest thing to do when we have noses like ours. So, these are issues, I think, which are even very relevant today, where immigrants go to different parts of the world, and then they have a problem of, finding out whether to assimilate into the new culture or to keep their identity, and how to do that, how to come at a balance. So I found this book very fascinating and very relevant to our experience. And I would like to invite the ambassador to say a few words first, and then we will ask Silvia to talk about the book, and maybe she will read us some passages from the book. Your Excellency.
Well, thank you very much. Obviously it's a great pleasure and an honor for me to be here today for the presentation of Silvia Di Natale's book Kuraj, and for Mrs. Kim Eklund's book Disappeared, if I'm not wrong. First of all, I would like to thank Silvia Di Natale, which is a very talented Italian writer, for having accepted the invitation of the Embassy of Italy to be with us in Karachi. Silvia Di Natale is a multiple prize winner in Italy, and she's well known also in Germany where she lives. And she's she's a true European author. And I would like to express my thanks to the other talented writers on stage, Mrs. Durdana Sumro, for having accepted to moderate this presentation, and of course, a Canadian, rather on the other side. Mrs. Di Natale's book, it's an epic and moving historical novel about nomadic girl search for home. It has already been mentioned. A delicate yet powerful tale that explores the difficulties of relocation to another country. An extremely relevant theme for those nations, such as modern Pakistan, as well as Italy in the past, for example, in Canada, that have large diasporas abroad. In the novel, the main character moves from Central Asia to Germany, to Köln, has been said as an epitome, although those that are forced to leave their homelands for countries with different cultures and mindsets, and languages, of course. Based on a true story, Kuraj is a novel full of poetry and human depth that won in Italy the prestigious literary prize Bagutta 2001. The book was originally written in Italian and has been recently translated into English and presented today. Mrs. Di Natale's book presentation follows the other very emotional event that took place yesterday here at the festival, Mr. Raponi's launch of a beautiful book on Abdul Sattar Edi, and I hope you all had the chance to attend. I'm sure that the books of the two authors will add to the increasing interest in Italy for this beautiful country, Pakistan, thereby bringing our two people closer to each other. Thank you very much and enjoy the readings.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And may I now invite Silvia to say a few words and to maybe read us a few passages from the book.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think Durdana and Mr. Okay. I think Durdana and Mr. Ambassador have said everything about my book, so I need very, very little to add of that. Maybe just explain a little bit that Kuraj is a real story. It's a story of a nomadic girl, a Turco nomadic girl, living on the north of Afghanistan, on the side of the Mudaria, who had to go to Germany, to Cologne, after the Second World War, and had to live there. It's because the two different cultures, extremely different cultures. And Naya self told me her story. I met her in Munich, in Germany. She was now an elderly lady. And in the book too, she's telling her stories. She cannot remember the language of her tribe, the tribe of the Tunchan, descendants of Genghis Khan. The only word she can remember is Kuraj. And Kuraj is quite a mysterious word. It's a Kyrgyz word, meaning the tumbleweed, the dry bushes roll through the steppe, they are thrown to the steppe by the wind. This only word has a lot of meaning in her memory. Then she's something else as just a word. We gave the name Kuraj to the dry bushes which the Afghanis picks up in spring and sends rolling over the steppes. Throngs of bushes move, and the steppe walks, or rather runs, enough to frighten the horses and give the impression to someone looking from a distance of a band of horsemen approaching at a gallop. But the word calls up yet another meaning, more mysterious than the others, and perhaps only distantly connected to them. Kurai, 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 said the shaman at the end of his incantations, and the word rolled over us, evoking the bushes racing over the steppe. Perhaps the Kurai of the shaman had no link with the other Kurai beyond this sound. Perhaps different meanings had fused in time to become that one word which encapsulated them all and which, more than any other, takes me back to our nomadic existence. Now, an episode of her nomadic life as she was living on the side of Amudarya and playing with her twin brother, and she encountered the cobra. Well, they are on the Tamarisk Hall. When the tamarisks turn pink in June, the slopes along the river take on its color and swarm with insects, then creep into the little flowers hanging there in clusters. The bright green erianthus looms over the landscape, and the river banks are swathed in a silvery green veil. All that green draws the children like insects round the tamarisk. Look, the leaves are sweet. Have a taste. We put the stiff little leaves, which stick to hands and palate, into our mouths. We ran further down, where the ground was soft and the grass higher than our ears. Come here, Jinchin, look. Jinchin appeared among the tamarisk, and like a puppy running to his master whistle, came bounding towards me, necked, with the amulets around his neck dancing, his shaved head gleaming in the sun, and his holy tuft of hair in the middle of his skull, flopping now left, now right, now over his eyes. We had fallen into the enchantment of spring. Creepers climbed along the ridging stem of the erianthus, their petals spotted with yellow and red. Bent over the orchid, we watched the progress of a hornet going in and out of the pollen sacs of flowers we had never seen before, which the tall grass of the river concealed like treasure. Look, Jinchin, flower with bags. The ground yielded easily to our little leather boots. When, all of a sudden, directly in front of us, a cobra reared up and swayed from side to side in a threatening posture. It took only a moment for Jinchin to push me further and deeper into the grass. I scream. The snake grips the little boy's flesh above the knee, where the skin isn't protected by the boot, then disappears among the erianthus stems, leaving my brother behind it in its blue-pink wake, writing on the ground. A little above the knee, the red stain is spreading. I run back up to the slope, past the tamarisks, toward the yurts, waving my arms. My Ling is outside with the women. Where is he? And they are already running to the river, already returning. My Ling is holding my brother in her arms. He's no longer shouting or crying. The spot on his leg is bigger now and redder. They carry him into the yurt and lay him down on the bed. Jinchin grasps for breath, his eyelids closing, weighted down by an invisible sleepiness. My Ling raises up his arm, but he flops alongside the bed as though it no longer is. Ugudelegu, the shaman, arrives. I leave the yurt and squat on my heels, my gaze riveted on the tamarisk slope and on the green ribbon along the river. I know that it won't be long before darkness falls from the hills above us. The women's cries reach me from inside the yurt. I recognize the sound of my Ling weeping. The green strip along the Amudarya is a shadow now, and only a narrow band of light still grazes the tamarisks.
Silvia, before you read another passage, I thought, that this book was inspired by a real person, this Naya. A real person. But many of the details that you mention in the book, they are like somebody who has actually been there and, seen it. And have you visited the area where she came from, this Amudarya and, the steps?
In fact, I have visited them. I was in Afghanistan many years ago, of course, in the 70s. At the time we could go to Afghanistan. It was no problem to go there. And I was in Uzbekistan. I was from Uzbekistan, from the center to the Amudarya, just to have a look of these places. But at the end, I had so many sources to create my book. At the end, Naya said to me, I could remember her childhood better than she self. So I could remember her childhood, she said, because she couldn't remember really. Her interview was just 10, 13 pages, no more. So I have to connect the link she gave to me and to create this story. How could it be possible? So it's a real story, but of course it's a fiction too, like most of the books. Do you think, yes? The clue of the book is the second one, because even if they're living so far away from every civilization or from every big cities, the Second War reached the nomads, the Tunchan too, because they are citizens of the Soviet Union, and Stalin is fighting against Hitler. But the Tunchan don't want to find on the side of Stalin because they hate him, because they think Stalin is making of them farmers, and they don't like it. They don't want to live their nomadic life. And so they will fight at the side of the German. There's a part of story of the Second War is not so well known. The Second War in Central Asia, where the people, in reality, a lot of people from the Soviet Union was fighting at the side of Hitler. So, like the Tunchan of my story, the Tunchan is a tribe. It don't exist, but it could be. And so is that the father of Naya will meet her future father as a lieutenant, German lieutenant, and will promise his daughter to him. So that's the reason why Naya has to leave her country and to go to Germany alone. She's now 9 years old, and she will go from Afghanistan to Cologne just alone. And now begins a new life where she's really a friend, and where the people who surround her doesn't understand at all what she's doing, what she's feeling. It's a really emotional, a complicated situation. So it's an episode where the 10th birthday of Naya and the house of her new family in Germany. And so, the day of my birthday, I knew nothing. After lunch, my grandfather had come to collect me, and side by side we had walked down the avenue of limes to the park, then down to the Rhine. Then grandfather had pulled his watch out of his pocket, and we had hurried back. Marianne put my felt slippers on and then took me by the arm and pushed me firmly but affectionately towards the dining room. On the other side of the frosted glass door, I could see lights and hear voices. I hesitated, and my grandfather beckoned me in. Marianne gave me a firm push. I went in, and my first impulse was to run away. Everybody was looking at me from where they sat round the table covered with white linen. My mother stared at me with that anxious air she had. My father with his unusual hesitant expression. My grandfather, a German from the Volga, spoke to me in Russian. She was convinced that I must understand at least a little of that language because I came from Stalin's country. "Ach, die bедный ребенок," she said to me. "Poor sweet child." And though I did not understand, I sensed the compassion in her voice, felt tears come to my eyes, and longed to run away. Beside her sat Dr. Wallace, whom I did not yet know, scrutinizing me like an art critic faced with an old painting whose period and value is to estimate. I did not know the reason for this meeting, and more perplexing still, I didn't understand the seating plan. Why was my grandfather not sitting at the head of the table, but pointing me to it? Why were my mother and my grandmother sitting opposite rather than beside each other? Why was a stranger with authoritative air sitting at the other end beside my father? I sat where I was told to, and everybody began all together to try to make me understand. My father showed me the paper I had with me in the leather bag around my neck when I arrived, and pointed with a finger to a date, forgetting that I did not know the meaning of written signs. An impatient Marianne repeated several words over and over, breaking them up into syllables so that I might understand better. "Es ist dein Geburtstag. It's your birthday. Don't you understand? Dein Geburtstag." Sitting at the table, in the place of honor, which in my opinion was unsuitable for the youngest person present, I thought that this was the feast of the beginning of the year, and I wondered why, in that case, I was the center of attention. And I was even more astonished when my mother held out a big box to me with a pink bow on it. I felt everybody's eyes on me, and as I untied the ribbon and looked at what was inside the box without daring to take it out. A blonde doll looked out at me with blue glass eyes. She wore a wreath of silk flowers in her hair, a pink frilly dress, a little silk slippers. At the slightest movement of my arm, heavy eyelids closed over the glass eyes, and the doll, snug in her cardboard box, seemed to be lying in a coffin. In my embarrassment, I continued to shake the flower box, and the obedient doll lowered and raised her eyelids, looking at me with her glass eyes. My mother gestured to me to take her out. She was watching me more anxiously than ever, so tense that she waited for my reaction that she was almost trembling. I was afraid she would burst into tears. In the confusion of sounds I heard at that time, without fully understanding their meaning, I searched for a word which would help me. I rummaged through the images I had accumulated. I remembered the postman holding out a parcel to Hannah, and Hannah putting coins into his hand, saying, "Danke." The boy coming and going from the gate to the kitchen door at the back of the house with big sacks of potatoes on his back. Every few steps, one of his clogs, which were too big for his feet, would fall off, and he would have to turn round again to put it back on. Marianne had filled his pockets with potatoes, and the boy had said, "Danke," to her and had clattered off, hunched inside his middle greatcoat as though he still had the sacks of potatoes on his back. Then I too said, Danke, and saw my mother's eyes light up suddenly. For the first time since I had come to the house, the anxiety left her face, and her lips curved in a faint smile. The others became convivial, as though as an expected order had freed them from the awkwardness that had restrained them until that moment, and they released the tension in a round of applause for the cake that Marianne put down triumphantly on the table.
Thank you, Silvia. That was most interesting. I found that this was actually for me the most interesting part of the book, where she, is trying to adjust to her new location, and then the way she searches for her identity, and she wants, she has forgotten where she comes from, and then the whole, the rest of the book is about her search for her identity. So I think I will leave leave it to you people if you want to ask any questions of the author. Are there any questions? No, I as a translator, one of the things that I was interested in was how much interaction was there between you and the translators,
Yes, between the English translator was really good communication. So we had, I could read the book. I had, I could realize some mistakes, small mistakes, but he did his work very, very well, very accurate. So that every word was just thought about, and I think he made a very good work, and he got a prize for them.
Yes, the book reads very fluently. I mean, it's like as if it was written in English.
Really, it's really, yes.
And Silvia, you mentioned earlier that when we were talking that you were working on something else now, which is...
Oh yes, this was my first novel. So now I've just finished my 8th novel, just coming, being published in Italy in Italian next autumn. And now I'm also thinking about something about Pakistan. So I got this occasion to know Pakistan better. I'm here for the second time, and so to know it better and maybe to collect life, just make the same work I did in Colombia last year, just going around and collecting life and collecting stories of the people. So in order to tell a country with the voices of the people who is living there. It was my experience in Colombia. It was a really good experience for me, and it was a really interesting book for the people reading it, because it's quite a kind of view you don't have every time. So I think it's a good occasion to do that.
Thank you, Silvia. And for those who are interested, the books, some books are available, some copies are available here, okay. And you may, I really recommend it. It's very brilliant reading. And Silvia, of course, is there to sign it for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce Kim Eklund. She's a writer, a journalist, and an educator who lives in Toronto. She has did her doctoral thesis on Ojibwe storytelling, which is, I think, a Red Indian tribe, is it? And she's traveled around the world to the Marshall Islands, China, France, and Zimbabwe. She has written this book, The Disappeared, which I must say is a very moving book. It is really, it is a book that is worth reading. I think I couldn't put it down. It was so good. And it's a very simple plot. It's about a Canadian girl who falls in love with a Cambodian musician in Toronto. And he is there basically as an exile he was as there as an exile, and she falls in love with him, and she learns, picks up a lot of stuff about Cambodian music and things from him. And then he goes back to look for his family. His family has disappeared during the genocide of the Pol Pot's genocide, when the Khmer Rouge were killing millions of Cambodians, and people would just be shot on the streets, and their bodies would be thrown in the canal. And I think in one part you mentioned that ducks were laying eggs in skulls, inside the canal and inside the rivers. So it's really, it was a very horrifying period. And when the lover goes back to Cambodia and she doesn't hear from him, then she goes looking for him. And you can just imagine the courage that a woman, a young girl would need to go searching for her lover in this far, halfway around the world, where the most unspeakable horrors are happening. But she does it, and of course people are not very helpful to her. She can't get any answers, and the whole story is about her search for him. So this is also a very thought-provoking book, and it's an issue, the issue of repression and of missing people is, it's very relevant. It's relevant to us as well, because we have had it in our recent past when people would just disappear into Guantanamo and you would not hear about them. And then we've had this, the missing people in Balochistan, the Supreme Court has been looking for them. And even in Bangladesh, where now they are trying to find out, what war crimes were committed during 1971. So it's a very relevant issue for all of us. And I'll ask Kim to, either if she wants to read some passages from her book or if she wants to talk about her book. Kim?
Okay. Thank you very much for your warm welcome here. I'd like first to take a moment to thank Oxford University Press and all the people who are taking care of us in such an important way and a warm way. I'd like to thank Amina Saeed and Asif Faruqi. I'd like to thank Samuel Ray, Rahila Bakay, Sunita Wadra, and of course our moderator, Durdana. Also, thanks to the Beach Luxury Hotel. It's been an absolutely fantastic stay here, and our host, Dinsha Avari, has been very attentive, and it's been a wonderful venue for this festival. So I thought what I might do is tell you a little story before I start. This is an old Grimm's fairy tale, so from the European tradition. And it's called The Singing Bone. It's actually my youngest daughter's favorite story. In this story, two brothers go out into a forest. And they go into the forest because there's a wild boar that's terrorizing the forest and terrorizing the kingdom. And the king says, "Whoever is able to kill the boar will have my daughter's hand in marriage." So these two poor young boys decide that they'll take a try. Now the youngest brother is good of heart, and the oldest brother is very evil. When the young brother goes into the forest, he's frightened. He's looking for the boar. He's trying to find out where it might be. And there's a little old man in the forest who's carrying a spear. And when the young brother meets the old man says, "I can see that you are good of heart. I will help you kill the boar." So the young brother goes with the old man, and the boar comes toward them. The old man's holding the sword. The boar runs right into the sword, and the old man gives it to him. So he puts it over his shoulders, and he begins to make his way out of the forest. On his way out of the forest, he sees his older brother. Now, the older brother has not even stepped foot in the forest. He was too afraid. He was in a bar, a tavern, on the side of the forest, drinking a lot, trying to get some courage to go in. When he sees his younger brother, he said, "Oh, you got the boar." He said, "I will help you take it back to the king." So as they're walking along, they have to cross a bridge. And the older brother says, "You first, younger brother, you go first." They're carrying the boar, and as they're halfway across, the older brother stabs the younger brother and kills him. He throws his body under the bridge, buries it, and takes the boar. Carries the boar back to the king, and he says to the king, "King, this boar has killed my youngest brother and eaten him, and I have killed the boar and brought it to you." And the king says, "This is very good. You will marry my daughter." Many years later, there's a shepherd who's going across the bridge, and he looks down and he sees a bone, a little white bone. He picks it up, he shines it. He said, "That will be a good flute for me." When he plays the flute, to his astonishment, the flute begins to sing a song. And the flute sings, "Ah, friend, thou blowest upon my bone. Long have I lain beside the water. My brother slew me for the boar, and took for his wife the king's young daughter." Well, the shepherd's astonished that bones can sing. So he says, "I'll take this bone to the king." When he takes the bone to the king, of course he plays it, and the bone sings the same song. So the bone sings that the older brother has killed the younger brother and taken the princess. Now, the king recognizes this story, and he knows finally the truth. And he says to the older brother, you have committed a crime. You will be put in a sack and drowned." And then he takes the bone, and he gives it a fine burial. I am interested in how bones sing, and I am interested in how writers blow on their bones and hear the songs that bones can sing. In the same way that I'm interested in how stories bear witness to our history. The book that I'm working on, the book that I'm here in Karachi for, is going to be called My Favorite Things. It will be published next year. But I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the research I'm doing for that, since it is in Karachi. In this book, there are two women, two jazz pianists. One is from Canada, and one is born in Karachi in 1950. They come together to play music. And as the story unfolds, we see how the two women have both lived under the social constraints of their own cultures. Masa, the woman who was born in Karachi, grew up in the 1950s and 60s here, and she's exposed to a great deal of music. She goes to the old clubs on Elphinstone, and in fact, in this very hotel, at the Beach Luxury Hotel, she plays the piano in the 007 club, and goes to a lot of the clubs that are around here. At that time, as most of you will know, there was a great deal of cross-fertilization of cultures. A lot of American jazz artists were here, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong. There's a very famous picture of Dizzy Gillespie sitting on the beach charming a snake beside someone on the beach at Seaview. There were lots of Karachi musicians, lots of Goan bands who played here. Well, one of the most famous ones was the Talisman Band, who played at the 007, the Moonglows, the In Crowd. And so this character, Masa, who studies here at St. Joseph's and learns to play piano and plays at home, she eventually finishes her schooling here, and then she is sent to Canada to go to school in Montreal. And when she goes there, she ends up staying there. And so we have the story of the young woman who's a jazz pianist, who is an expatriate, who marries, has children, and lives a life in Montreal. Now, on the other side is the Canadian woman. She's born 10 years earlier in 1940, and she is born under very particular circumstances. And the story I'm about to tell you right now about her is something that most Canadians don't know. She was born under a law that was only repealed in 1958 called the Female Refuges Act. Now, under the Female Refuges Act, any woman under the age of 35 could be arrested for the crime of incorrigibility. And incorrigible meant being disobedient to your parents, perhaps public drunkenness, perhaps having relationships that your parents didn't approve of. No formal charge or trial was needed for this. The hearings before the judges were private. The law was largely used to police women's sexual behavior and to enforce, this is a quotation from the law, the moral standards of the community. Under this law, women would be incarcerated for up to 2 years. And because many of them were pregnant, they had their babies in prison, and the babies were taken away and put up for adoption. This was a law that governed my grandmother, my mother, my aunties, and me for the first 3 years of my life. And it is a law that, although it was repealed in 1958 and had very far-reaching effects, very few people remember, no one wants to talk about, and young women do not know about. So in my novel, Catherine is born to a woman who is incarcerated under the Female Refuges Act. And then her mother was charged by her own father for having a relationship that the mother didn't approve of. After her mother is released from the reformatory, from the prison, she does manage to reclaim her daughter. And then she raises her as a single woman in the 1950s, having to work and raise a child alone, and is quite ostracized by her society because of that. So I tell these two stories side by side. The woman from Karachi, the woman from Canada, and they play music and meet together, and they tell each other the stories of their lives, and they tell each other about the constraints that they have lived under. I was interested in telling this story because I am interested in how bones sing and how the things that we forget come back, and when we retell them, how that reshapes how we are in the world and how we conceive of ourselves and how we conceive of our relationships. I think that as a novelist, I have a few questions that have become central to me, especially in the wake of writing The Disappeared and the research in Cambodia. I think that it's important to ask, how do we claim responsibility for the past? How do we move on without forgetting the past? And what do we do once we know? I feel that we are all connected to today in a way that we have not been previously. We're connected by the internet, by cameras, by Skype, by travel, by all sorts of communications that were unheard of in my grandmother's day. So that I think that because of this, we can see if we look. If we care to know, we can know what is going on. And I think that we cannot unbury the stories. We cannot not unbury the stories. And if we don't unbury the stories and learn to listen to each other, however we are, whoever we are, however far apart we are geographically, then what kind of darkness are we working in? So my question as I'm writing is, how do I keep nurturing these decisions of the heart in my writing, in my communications with others? How do we keep creating the connections between each other? And then how do we speak them? How do we tell the stories, and how do we listen to the stories? A World War II survivor, Sarah Berkowitz, said, "Silence is the real crime against humanity." And this is something that I believe very strongly. I think that this can be a social responsibility of the artist if the artist is interested in social responsibility. I thought that I'd read just a very short passage from The Disappeared so you could have a little taste of what it sounds like. Because it is the book where I began to think seriously about the novel as witness. And that book started because of an encounter with a woman from Cambodia. It's interesting, people telling us their stories. I was in Cambodia traveling. My husband was doing medical work, and I was with my kids with him. And I was alone in a market one day, and a woman came up to me and she said, "You know, I wanted to go to Canada, but I was forcibly repatriated to Phnom Penh. And, you know, I have some friends in Canada," and so on. And then she leaned in very close to me and she said, "You know, I lost my whole family in the Pol Pot time." And I didn't know how to respond to her. I didn't know what to say. So I simply said to her, "I'm so sorry." I said, "Is there anything I can do?" And she said, "No, I just want you to know." And this moment was a real turning point for me, where someone coming, a complete stranger coming up and asking you simply to know their story. I felt the power of that and began to work from that. So I'll read you just a little bit. This is when the lover goes to Cambodia. She's there for the first time, and she's trying to find out how to find her lover. Her driver is called Mao. When Mao stepped forward, the other drivers fell back. He listened, assessing and calculating, when I told him that I wanted to look for you in all the nightclubs of Phnom Penh. He showed me his remark with the yellow fringe in the busy market. He was a small man with a scar on his left cheek. He wore a Chicago Cubs baseball cap. His eyes softened fleetingly when he looked at me and he said, "Maybe it will take time. Maybe it is like looking for a single grain of rice." I was not sure how I would find you, and I was not sure you wanted me to. The smell of the river Basak, meltwaters from distant mountains, tangled into humid air and garlic and night jasmine and cooking oil, male sweat and female wetness. Corruption loves the darkness. In Montreal, I knew which doors, which alleys, which snowbanks hid bags of drugs and young girls with red lips and skinny boys with narrow hips, the things men think they want. But here, I did not know where anything was, and I was afraid to go out alone to look for you. Mao pulled into traffic, and I was relieved to be out of the market. Everyone was trying to make a few riel. Mao stopped in front of Lucky No. 1 restaurant on Monivong Boulevard, called a waiter to give me a table on the street. I asked him to eat soup with me. He waved his hand in front of his face. He said, "I must watch my moto. I will wait." The heart was packed and you were not there. I did not expect to find you in the first place I looked, but I hoped. Mao said, "I know another place." He drove around Independence Monument to a small club called Nexus. A DJ sat behind a rickety table playing a collection of jazz records on a turntable and Khmer music on a cassette player. This was a place you might be, but you were not here. I said to Mao, "What if he has a girlfriend?" Night after night he drove me. I thought, what if he does not go out to listen to music anymore? What if I never go to the same place at the same time? What if the gods are deaf and mute and play tricks on me forever? I walked into the Globe on Sihanouk Boulevard, and I saw you standing at the bar. Your dark hair was still long, tied back. You wore a white t-shirt. You leaned on the bar, and you were alone and absorbed in the music. You in Phnom Penh, and your eyes gold-flecked. I blinked and breathed and saw you once again. The DJ put on an old Oscar Peterson recording. I listened to that caressing, flirting, demanding touch on a piano playing L'Impossible. Now that I had found you, I had to get used to you again. When the song was finished, you shifted on your feet, and you looked around, and your eyes passed over me, and then I watched them flicker back startled and rest on me.
Thank you, Kim. It's very interesting that music was such a part of the disappeared, and then this book that you are writing also has like a musical, theme to it. How far have you progressed in this book, and how long have you been in Pakistan, and how long are you intending to stay here for that?
Yeah, the book is it's getting close to being finished, and I've been here only a week since last Sunday, but I've been able to do great deal of research from home as well, and then in the week that I've been here, people have warmly helped me with research. So.
Because I think it will be very interesting because I was earlier in the morning I was. At this Karachi Stories, at the launch of Karachi Stories, and there was one short story there which was about the Goan community, and everybody said, well, this is very interesting because we don't often, read anything about the Goan community. And so this is interesting that your book, there will be a lot about them and, about their musicality. So is there anyone who wants to ask any questions of Kim? Yes, Asif.
For both the books, I'm fascinated by the use of recent history, especially history of this region. But my question is to Kim, who is addressing a portion of Karachi's history, which is almost being papered out. And I was wondering if you have a sense of not only the Goan community, but the change that has taken place in Karachi. How do you relate yourself with that? And how will your audience, which will be a mainstream audience, they will react to a city they may not know enough about or may have just read, kind of peripherally in the newspaper headlines?
Yeah. Well, I think that people won't be familiar with the history of Karachi, as I was not either. I mean, I think one of the reasons I'm interested in music is because it is a way of communicating where we don't need words. And, people from any culture and people from any language can play together and connect with each other. And in periods of interchange, easy cultural interchange, music is also one of the places where people connect most easily often. So that's one of the reasons that I'm interested in that. And I understand, I haven't heard this music yet, but I understand that there is some fusion music happening with traditional Pakistani music, which I think is wonderful. I'll be interested to hear it. And in terms of the audience, I mean, we have so many misconceptions, preconceptions, journalistic conceptions of Pakistan, as you maybe have of Canada as well. And I think by telling people's individual stories, we can get past some of those into a place that's more real and a place where humans connect person to person, a place that's truer.
And how long are you planning to stay much longer in Pakistan to get any more research done, or is it all finished and complete?
Yeah, I probably won't be able to stay much longer this trip, but I will be certainly quick to come back if I have a chance.
Well, I just hope that your book will not end with an explosion. That most of the writing which is coming out of Pakistan these days is very...
I promise no explosions.
I wish we could promise that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why did you choose Karachi as a city?
Good question. I chose Karachi because I have a friend in Canada who's from Karachi, and she started telling me her stories. And then once I learned about the music scene here, I thought, perfect.
Yes.
Kim's has got a question, but this is just a comment. When you mentioned Grimm's fairy tales and the story of the book, I myself, when I was a child, and maybe you'd be interested to know that when children are sick, and especially in those days, people would come, relatives would come and give them money so they could go and buy something. So when I had the flu, and it was a pandemic in those days, so when I was all right, I got onto the bike with somebody who helped us in the house, went and from London to Depot on Rawalpindi, I got the Grimm's fairy tales.
Oh, that's great.
I was so sad all of them. While I was recuperating, it was a very good selection. But they became my favorite too. And today, the way you described the way the bones speak,
Yes.
I think it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, sharing stories and telling stories. And when you tell stories, they come from the heart of your traditions.
Yeah.
There is so much understanding.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like the reality had to be changed, new facts emerge from the story. I think that's beautiful. I mean,
Yes.
something for me to pick up from and use in my educational experience.
Oh,
Thank
nice.
you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I just thank you? I just wanted to say that some of the books are available in our bookstore. Penguin Canada very kindly sent us books, which we are not selling, so it's on a first-come, first-served basis. And Kim is here, she can sign. And of course, Silvia's book is available as well, bookstore. We have Kim's book, OUP has Kim's book, and Silvia's book is available at Liberty. So please do avail the opportunity of getting it signed. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, the author.